Hey everybody, our mission here at the Heart Coherence Collaborative is to get people in touch with the healing power of the heart.
And we really need your help. Right now, only 1% of viewers subscribe. We are aiming to take that number to 6%.
The reason why we want to do that is the more people that subscribe, the more people in the world can learn the magical practice of heart coherence.
So please help us out. If you've ever listened, if you love this message, please just take a moment to subscribe.
Thank you so much.
We love. Okay.
Welcome everybody to the Heart Coherence Collaborative. We are so excited to have our good friend Gregg Braden back with us again.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Hey, I am really happy to be with you. This is a new year. We have a new world ahead of us. First time you and I have been together in this new year. This is completely unscripted. We have no idea what any of us are going to say, and that's what makes it really exciting. So thank you for inviting me back. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
We're so happy to have you back. So we're going to be doing the same thing as last time, which is that we'll be, as a collective, getting together and getting coherent every day for 30 days. And then we're so excited that this time we're going to have at the end of the event a large meditation, and we're going to be measuring its effect on global consciousness and coherence. And we're really excited to talk to you about what you do involving all of the measuring and studying. And we're also going to be speaking with you at the Heart Math event. So we have so much to talk about today.
Yeah.
So where would you like to begin? Where's a good place to begin?
Go ahead.
Well, I think that we would love to start with where the best place is to start, which is to just all get coherent.
Okay.
So could we just do a little coherence exercise to get in our heart?
Yeah. So if everyone could just focus your attention in the area of your heart and imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual. You can try a pace of 5 seconds on the in-breath, 5 seconds on the out-breath, in and out through the heart. Now, as you're breathing in and out through the heart, I want you to think about someone or something in your life that you really care about. It could be a person, a pet. Really just feel this care as you breathe in and out through your heart.
And still breathing in and out of your heart. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, if that feels good to you. Breathe in the feeling of ease.
All right. So as Leah was mentioning, in our global coherence event, we're all going to be coming together at the end of this event to try to radiate love towards the actual field. We were wondering if you could just share with us, what do you think what impact could doing this have on the field?
So, okay, so let's start at the very beginning then. I want to honor your process and your protocols here. May I start at the very beginning? Are you okay with that?
For sure.
When we talk about our relationship to the world around us, up until relatively recently, there was a lot of controversy in the scientific community as to whether or not, number one, whether or not a field even exists that underlies our existence, number one. Number two, if it does exist, what is our relationship to the field? How deeply are we really connected to this field? So the Princeton University began the pioneering studies with something called the Global Consciousness Project, GCP. This was Dean Radin and Roger Nelson when they began with an array of 40, they were called eggs, EGGS. They were random number generators. that were placed on continents all over the world, and they were all feeding back to one computer, Princeton University. And the idea is this, that the random number generators are doing just that. They're spitting out random numbers, but if something happens and the field that they are connected to, they become less random, they become more ordered. And this was some of the early work that showed there is an effect, because when humans are focused on a big event, and it doesn't have to be a bad event. This is initially where it showed up at like events like September 11th, 2001, or the death of Princess Diana, things like that. They began noticing that these random number generators became more ordered, which means that human consciousness was influencing a non-physical field that these were a part of. And this is a phenomenon that needed to be explained. It needed to be explored and explained. That system is still running to some extent. I don't know how many of those random number generators are actually there. And it has now been merged with a second system that was organized by the Institute of Heart Math. And I feel especially close to that. I'm on the steering committee for that. And I was working with Heart Math when that project was booted up. Even as far as developing the name, we already had the Global Consciousness Project. We were looking at coherence, and we opted to call it, so Global Consciousness was GCP, Global Consciousness Project. We ended up calling ours the Global Coherence Initiative, GCI. But these two systems are working together. GCI was not working with random numbers. However, it is working with very precisely, finely tuned sensors that are deployed. And I don't know the exact number. Maybe you guys know. Do you know how many sensors are out there right now? I think there may be six to seven sensors on different continents. I know there's one in Boulder Creek at the California headquarters. There's one in the UK. There is, I believe, one in India, one in Peru. I think there's one in Eastern Europe right now. And this is working on a different principle, but it is correlated to the original system, to the Global Consciousness Project. So they're both working together. And what's happening is the GCI project is working with magnetic fields generated by the planet and our relationship to those fields as well. Those underground sensors, they're all underground. They are sending back data to a server, one computer at the Institute of Heart Math headquarters in Boulder Creek, California. And they have very sophisticated software now that is interpreting that data, and it's available on their website. If people want to go to the heartmath.org website, go to the science and the research section, and you can see, I think there's usually a day lag time, usually about a day behind, but we can see that there is an effect. And what it shows is that when many people come together in coherence, that the field becomes more quiet. And when we are not in coherence, when we are in chaos, the field becomes noisy, a noisy field. So what's happening is, between these two systems, we are showing for the first time in modern history with modern technology that we humans have a direct influence on a field or multiple fields of energy and information that underlie our existence. Now, the field that we're even talking about, you know, in spirituality, metaphysics, people have always said everything's connected. Indigenous traditions have said that for a long time. But it wasn't until the year 2012 that scientists actually confirmed the existence of the field, and it happened scientifically. I mean, anecdotally, intuitively, we've all accepted that. But from a scientific perspective, it was in the year 2012 in Geneva, Switzerland, at the largest machine ever built by humankind. It's called the CERN Superconducting Super Collider. It's a machine that is a circular tube, two tubes that are so big they straddle the border between two nations, between France and Switzerland, 150 meters under the surface of the earth. And the bottom line is, in one direction, this machine will begin to accelerate quantum particles until they're just under the speed of light. They're traveling just under the speed of light. And then they do the same thing in another tube. They are accelerating in the opposite direction until they're just under the speed of light. And at just the right time and just the right location, they will allow those particles to collide from opposite directions just under the speed of light, smashing them into about a bajillion pieces. That's a very technical term. And what's interesting is they're trying to recreate the instant of creation, what some physicists call the Big Bang. So they're trying to recreate the Big Bang to map the laws of physics that were implemented in those first few fractions of a second when the particles began to form. And it's through these experiments that they were able to determine that there is, in fact, a field that was formed during that time. It's now called the Higgs field. Interestingly, it's named after the physicist Peter Higgs, who is still alive and predicted the field. So he got to see his prediction actually come to fruition. A lot of times scientists make those predictions and, it's 100 years later that somebody actually proves it. So Peter Higgs had the satisfaction of seeing his prediction come true. So what we now call the Higgs field, my sense, is part of an even deeper field that is still yet to be acknowledged. All the indications are there, but it's part of a deeper field. So the bottom line is that scientifically, it is now accepted that there is a field of energy that underlies all of existence. Energy is information. And the beauty is, and even today, if I go to a physics conference, I'll see a physicist and he'll be at the podium and his hands, he's saying, oh yeah, there's a field out there that connects all things. And his hand is doing this. This is the piece that makes coherence so powerful, because it's not that the field is out there. Every cell in our body, we say the average human has about 50 trillion cells, and every one of those cells has about 100 trillion atoms. Here's the beauty. Every one of those atoms is emerging from that field right this second and collapsing back into the field. We're part of this constant dance of information emerging and collapsing back into that field. And the reason this is important is because we provide the template for what those atoms become through our thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, the way we think of ourselves and the way we see ourselves. And this bridges so many of the different sciences, whether you're talking about psychology or physiology, you're talking about the trauma release, trauma healing, physical healing, emotional healing, psychological healing, mental healing, physiological healing, and spiritual healing. They're all happening within the context of this field. So I just want to say right off the bat, the field is real. It's not a metaphor. It's not make-believe, and it's not a woo-woo, concept. And there's no controversy as to whether or not the field exists. The controversy is, how deeply does our relationship really run with this field? And we are still answering that, and I think we will be answering that for many, many years. The key is that we are the field. It's not out there. We are the field. So if we want that field to reflect peace and harmony in our world, we've got to feed that field peace and harmony. In other words, we must become in our lives what we choose to experience in the world. Now, a lot of people I've spoken with don't like that concept because it implies a level of personal responsibility that they would prefer to avoid. But it actually makes a lot of sense. This field is a neutral field. It doesn't know about good, bad, right, wrong, doesn't have a judgment. It simply is a quantum mirror that it's in all directions, that is constantly reflecting back to us what we give it to work with. What do we feed that field? Well, in terms of global coherence, the field knows essentially two states. The field knows chaos and the field knows coherence. And I think this is really important right now because we have to look at this within the context of the world that we find at our doorstep, that we can't do this in a vacuum. We're living a time of extremes. I think that's no secret to anyone watching this podcast. We're living a time of extremes, social extremes, climate extremes, political extremes, conflict extremes. And in the presence of those extremes, many people are responding, thinking that they are doing something good and positive and helpful. But here's what the science suggests. If you're in the streets angrily protesting and burning down buildings, turning over cars and hurting other people, with the idea that you are protesting against something you don't like, you have to ask yourself, what am I feeding the field? Am I feeding the field chaos, or am I feeding the field coherence? And the answer to that question will inform whoever asked that question. It'll inform them as to whether or not they're being effective or not, and the best way to be effective. Now, that flies in the face of what a lot of my friends and colleagues are doing right now. There are a lot of things that people are upset about. You know, you and I are in the United States right now. Politically, it's a hotbed of politics because this is an election year. We've got what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Israel, and people angrily protesting against, what's happening. And honestly, I totally get that there are times where anger serves us. I think there are times we have to be angry to express what it is that's happening. But this is a deeply spiritual concept. So then I'll stop. This is a deeply spiritual concept because when we all have a warrior within us, and I think we all know that. And sometimes we call upon that warrior to serve us. So it's not about whether or not that warrior is present. It's the question from a spiritual perspective is, what do we become in the presence of what we are protesting? What do we allow the events of the world to make us into, to turn us into? Because if the events of the world turn us into something that we would never choose to be in a million years, if those events reduce us, if we submit to the most primal instincts of hate and rage and revenge, then that is very, very different from protesting from the love of what we know is possible in our lives. So the question is, do we fight and do we protest from the love of what we know is possible, or the fear of what happens if we don't? And when we invoke our inner warrior, do we invoke our warrior from the love of those behind us, our family and our community and our society, or do we invoke that warrior because of the hate of the enemy that we perceive in front of us? These are deeply spiritual concepts. It's up for all of us right now because we're being presented with atrocities and horrendous events of the world. You either have to look away and ignore it, or you have to engage it in some way. The healthy way to engage it is what we're talking about now, because when we create that coherence in our bodies and we're feeding that field, the coherence, we're actually feeding a possibility that matches what we know is true in our hearts, a possibility of peace and cooperation. So I'm just going to ask, does that make any sense, what I've said? Leah, I know you work with your clients a lot, and I know these issues come up. The outcome as a warrior, if you are a warrior in a situation where you have to defend yourself or your family, does it make sense if I say that the outcome in the physical world may be the same, but on a spiritual level, it's very, very different to fight from the love of what's possible rather than the fear or the hate or the anger, the revenge? And does that make sense? Did I say that all right?
Absolutely.
It does make a lot of sense. I think it's not an easy answer of how to do that for
Well,
ourselves.
we're going to get to that. I want to take a breath and let you chime in, and I think this is where coherence comes in, because the ability to create coherence in the human body, to the best of our knowledge, we're the only form of life that can do this on demand, at will, on demand, when we choose. We're the only form of life that can sit in a chair like this alone or with, thousands of people online and say, in this moment, we choose to create coherence in our bodies. Now, honestly, other forms of life may do this by instinct. I believe some animals do this by instinct, but they do not have the consciousness to do it at will, on demand, when they choose. And the truth is, when we most need the coherence, often the conditions are least conducive to that coherence. So most animals cannot do what we can do. But here's the beauty. If we try to solve our problems, and if we try to respond to hate and fear in the world through our mind is a beautiful thing, but the brain is a polarity organ. We've got left and the right brain. And this is where the ego and the ego loops reside. So if we try to solve the big questions of life, or we try to respond to those atrocities through the brain, we will always have the polarities that the brain offers. We'll always have good, bad, right, wrong, success, failure, worthy, not worthy. But the heart, the beauty of the heart is we don't really have a left and a right heart. So when we move into our hearts through the practices of coherence, we build that coherence, and we'll do it here before we leave. Let's take our audience through a little coherence exercise. But when we do that, what we're doing is we're bypassing that polarity, and it allows us objectively, this is the key, to objectively look at the world square on, to objectively look at the things that are difficult to look at real time or in our own past, in our own history, in our own trauma. So I'm the product of, and I've shared this, it's not a secret, I'm the product of a very dysfunctional, abusive alcoholic family. My father was the abuser. And I have a younger brother, 4 years younger, and my mom. And my mom and my brother and I got the bad end of that until he left. He chose to leave the family. And, back in the 50s and 60s, the whole idea of resilience was suck it up and get over it. If you're having a bad day, suck it up and get over it. And so now with tools like this, and I've had the reason I could speak to this is because I've used this in my own life. I became affiliated with the Institute of Heart Math almost at the time of their inception on the West Coast. They had been on the East Coast as a community. But when they moved to their current facilities, it was about a year after that I became aware of what they were doing and contacted them, and we've worked together ever since. And the tools that they offered then and now I applied in my life, and this is one of those tools. When we have trauma, you can't change what happened. All we can do is change what it means to us and the way that we perceive that trauma. Often, if we only do it through the mind, it is certainly useful and it can get us somewhere. And I often hear people say they feel incomplete. It's not that it's wrong, it's just not finished yet. And now we know the reason, because the heart has its own neural network. The heart has its own, those 40,000 specialized cells, sensory neurites. It thinks, feels, and remembers independently of the cranial brain. So unless we're addressing the memory in the heart, objectively, we may feel incomplete when it comes to that deep level of healing. Heart-brain coherence is a very powerful tool that allows us to move into an objective state where we're able to re-examine our experience without the polarity and the judgment. And when we can do that, there's a whole biochemical process that results from that. We begin to free what are called neuropeptides. These are the chemical signatures of the trauma in our lives. And all we're doing is harmonizing the heart and the brain. And this is one of many applications of coherence. When we do that, it's not limited to what's happening inside of our bodies, because we're also feeding the field that healing. And this is why I think this is so important right now. We are obviously living a pivotal time in the history of our planet and of our civilization. There's a new world emerging, but it's not here yet. And there's an old world that is buckling and collapsing because it's unsustainable. I don't know everyone personally that's watching this podcast, obviously, but I bet I know something about everyone watching, and that's simply this. I don't think any of us want to carry the generational hurt and the suffering and the fear that has preceded us. I don't think any of us want to carry that into this new world. And we wouldn't wish that on a future generation for anything. So when we allow ourselves to heal not only our own personal, but generational trauma, even if we never physically make a baby that grows up in the new world, we are feeding the field of consciousness that those babies in the future will link into. To the degree that we can embrace our own healing, we are laying a foundation for a clean slate from that perspective of without the hate and without the fear that has led to so much suffering in this world. And it all boils down to how we feel about our experiences. Heart-brain coherence is a powerful, powerful tool. In my opinion, is tremendously underrated. That requires nothing more than focus, breath, and feeling. And that's all it takes to get into that space. So when we feed that field, not only do we have the opportunity to feed the field consciously, putting coherence into the field, but our own personal healing also feeds the field, because we are healing our perspectives and the emotions around our perspectives of what we see happening in life. So I think we often don't talk about this role of coherence and the potential that it has, not only now in this time, in this world, but in laying that foundation for our future. So I just wanted to kind of chime in and bring that in today, if that makes sense.
Sure does. Did you say you wanted to guide something?
Well, I think we could toward the end of our program. I don't know. I want to honor your dream. I want to honor your vision. I don't know precisely where else you wanted to go with this. So let's go whatever conversation you'd like to have. And if there's specific applications, or if I missed the mark and there's something else you want to talk about, I'm happy to do that.
I would love to just hear more about the science and the experiments that have emerged,
Sure.
especially since 2012, because I think it helps people believe in it when they hear the science.
Sure. Well, the science is emerging. And this is one of the really beautiful things. People say, I Googled it and I don't see it on the Google. And this is really new science. And it is being carried out independently by the Institute of Heart Math, privately funded. And I'm emphasizing this because if it is commercially funded, if it was a government grant or a military grant or a university grant, then those people have the ability to skew and distort the information and to use it in ways that we probably would never want that information to be used. I mean, you could imagine what we're finding now is that individual humans influence a collective field of consciousness. The US military is fascinated by this, as you can imagine. So HeartMath is working to stay free of the encumbrances and the strings that are often attached to that kind of funding. And so some of the work is, it's slow sometimes, but it is rock solid science. And as Roland McCready is the lead scientist, and as new discoveries are made, research papers are published on that particular discovery, peer-reviewed journals, the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, some of the medical journals specifically are interested in the heart specifically as being much more than a pump in our bodies, and the role that is now recognized that the heart is playing in our bodies, but the geophysical role, our relationship to the magnetic fields of the planet. So I'll just give you an example. One of the things that became apparent early on, is fascinating to me, is that so first of all, Earth's magnetic field is not a constant. It ebbs and it flows, and it has a direct relationship to the sun and to other cycles, geophysical cycles. So when our magnetic fields are strong, what we find is that collectively and individually, either in our families or our communities or between nations, it's all the same, is that we are less aggressive and more willing to work together and cooperate to solve our problems in the presence of a strong magnetic field and coherence. When those fields are weak, just the opposite of that is what's happening. In weak magnetic fields, we become more aggressive. So it's probably no surprise that we right now, beginning in the year 2020, we hit a weak point in our magnetic cycle. And you're seeing that reflected in conflict throughout the world. But I want to be really clear about this, because it doesn't mean we must have conflict. We are not slaves to those cycles. We can be vulnerable and we can be susceptible. But also, when you look at it's like a big sine wave of the peaks and the valleys. I didn't know we were going to talk about this, so I don't have the charts up, but they're big sine waves, the peaks and valleys of the magnetic fields. And what you find is the beginning and the end of the great wars in history are at the tops and the bottoms of those fields, which tells us that we are also living the greatest opportunity for peace. Because if we recognize that we are vulnerable and susceptible, then we can become better listeners. We can listen with our heart in coherence rather than our brain in judgment. We can listen to our adversaries. This could be a sibling, it could be parents and kids, it can be partners, intimate life partners, it can be coworkers, it can be the leaders of nations. If we know that this is happening, we can become very good listeners, extend that olive branch of peace, and really, really hear what one another are saying. So we're living both right now. And we are now in the upswing. If we can stay out of a global war for another year or so, then those fields become stronger and stronger, and we're moving more into the phase of cooperation. I had the opportunity to speak at the United Nations with a dear colleague, Bruce Lipton, a few years ago. And they asked us what we saw for the next 15 years. They look at 15-year blocks of time for economics and resources and preparation. And they said, what do you guys see happening in the next 15 years? And Bruce talked about it from a biological perspective, and I talked about it from a geophysical and social potential perspective. And when I began talking about conflict cycles and showed the map of conflict cycles for hundreds of years, you can see where these cycles ebb and flow. The UN said, how come we don't know about this? They said, we didn't know. We thought conflict is spontaneous. You know, it just happens when a war breaks out, and it may. But there are guiding principles because we are deeply related to the physical parameters of the planet that we live on. And that is overlooked a lot of times. And the magnetic fields are one of those planets. So it is our relationship to those magnetic fields that the sensors for GCI are picking up on. So, and again, it's not only bad things. One of the, I think one of the most profound, clearest indications of this was the election of Barack Obama. And you can go back in the HeartMath, I think they have it in the archives you can access online. You can see in the field, it's mapped every 24 hours. So you have a block, a 24-hour block, and then you have another 24 month by month. And you can go back into the month of January when he was inaugurated. And you can see leading up to the inauguration, there's all kinds of excitement in the field because chaos, because everybody, I mean, it meant so many different things to different people. And then right as the inauguration happened, it's like the whole world was holding its breath and the field got really quiet. The way it's depicted, it was a blue background, and it was almost solid blue. There was no other colors were in there showing that chaos. And then after it happened, it's like the world was in shock, and it stayed quiet for a period of time as the implications really sunk in of what had just happened. And then you could see it gradually went back to normal, to where it was before the whole thing happened. And this was a beautiful example of an indication of our relationship to the field that doesn't have to be around a tragedy. It was around an event that captured the attention of the whole world. So when human consciousness is focused not on our random everyday events, but when we come together in focus on something specific, that is where the coherence, and we do this in a coherent way, it shows us that we're having an influence in the field. And this is where HeartMath's heart-brain coherence technique can be so really powerful, is because if we can consciously feed the field, we know we have that effect. We're showing that we have an effect. So the science shows that humans influence the magnetic fields of the planet we live in. That's a mind blower right there, because we've always been led to believe that we're separate from that field. So if we have an influence, can it be a positive influence? And can we do that without having a tragedy to bring us together, or an election to bring us together? And the answer is yes. So this is where HeartMath and GCI come in. They've created the Global Coherence Initiative. Doesn't cost anything. People can log on to the website. They can sign up, no charge. There are heart focuses every 30 days on the full moon to feed coherence into the field. And during specific events, people are feeding that coherence into the field. And now we have a way to measure the outcome, the feedback. It's kind of like a stethoscope that your healthcare professional would use listening to your respiration. These nodes that we have, these sensors, are like a stethoscope on the planet Earth. So we can listen in to the planet's response. In this case, it's on a magnetic level of what we are feeding that field through our conscious choice to create coherence. So.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to first thank you for that. That was pretty much an amazing motivational speech for anybody listening. And I want to just thank our listeners, because you are having an influence on the field. So thank you for sharing that with us. We're making a difference, everybody.
Well, yeah, well, the beauty is we're feeding the field every moment of every day. And the question is that we ask ourselves, and I ask myself this throughout the day, well, what am I feeding the field? Am I feeding the field coherence, or am I feeding the field chaos? Buckminster Fuller, before he died in the early 80s, he was an amazing visionary. He was the architect of the geodesic dome, for people that may not know who he was. But he made a statement, I think it was so powerful, and he said, you're never going to change the world by fighting against the things you don't like. He said, if you want to change the world, find a new way, a better way to do things, and people will follow the new way, and the old way will fall away. Find a new way that makes the old way obsolete. And I think that's what we're looking at here. If you meet the violence and the fear and the atrocities at the same level they're happening, now you're stuck in an ancient conflict that perpetuates the very things that we choose to say we want to heal. But when we engage in the field, we're one step below or one step above, if you want to look at it that way, because we're feeding the field that's influencing the fear, that's influencing the hate, that influences all of those things. It doesn't impose our will. People have asked about this. Are we imposing our will? No, because we have free will as to whether or not we respond to that influence. But more often than not, and what the science is showing, is that people are influenced and do respond to the coherence in the field, often on the subconscious level. It's just that they feel better, they're more cooperative, they're better listeners. So if we could do it consciously, and if we have a lot of us doing it consciously, and we do, I don't even know what the numbers are right now for the people who are engaged in the Global Coherence Initiative family. But you can sign up on the website, you can become part of that family. And it's pretty cool because every time someone logs on the computer and goes into the Coherence Initiative exercise, their computer places a little balloon, a little bubble on a map of the Earth. And when you do that, and then you're looking at all the other little bubbles from all the other people that are doing the same thing you're doing, it helps you to feel that you are connected. You're not alone. You're part of a bigger process, even though you may not know those people. And the really beautiful thing is that 24/7, always somewhere on this planet, you will see those bubbles. Always someone is feeding coherence into that field. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So did we cover, I don't know how technical you want. Roland gets into the weeds on the technical things, and we can a little bit, but most people, I want people to sense the significance of the practice and know that the science is backing it. And if you are inclined to look at the numbers and the science, it's available at no charge on the heartmath.org website. People can go see that. Some people, their eyes glaze over when they look at the charts because they don't really know what they're seeing. And others, they say, wow, man, this is pretty sweet. You know, it's actually doing something. So that's what makes it, I think that's what makes it exciting. So should we do a coherence exercise?
Yeah, let's end with that.
Yeah, I didn't know we were going to do this. I typically have a soundtrack that I use that helps. We can do it without the soundtrack. We'll do the soundtrack of life.
Beautiful.
So what I want to begin by saying, there is no incorrect way of doing this. There are techniques that we've learned that work with some people almost universally. And so I'm going to share some of those techniques. So the 3 steps for anyone who's not familiar with this, 3 steps. It is focus, breath, and feeling. So if you haven't done so already, I'm going to invite everyone to close your eyes and allow your awareness to move from the world around you to the world within you. And we want to begin by focusing on our heart center. One of the things that I've found with indigenous people from all over the world who want to focus on the heart is they will gently touch their heart in a way that is comfortable for them. It can be a single finger on the sternum, a couple of fingers. It can be an open palm. It can be a Buddhist mudra held, nestled right into the sternum. But the key is that our awareness will always go to the place in our body where we feel the sensation, where we feel the touch. So if you touch your heart center in the center of your chest and allow your awareness to go to that place, this is the first step. And holding our focus in this place on our heart, the second step invites us to breathe a little bit slower than we would typically breathe. Here's the key. When we exhale for a period of time, slightly longer than the inhale, this is a trigger for the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation response, and this is what we want. So I'm going to invite you, we'll do it for the count inhale, the count of 4, and a release, the count of 6. Let's just do this together with our focus on the heart. Breathe as if we're breathing from the heart. First breath, inhale, begin. And release. Just feel that shift in your body. Inhale again. And release. One more time, inhale. And release your breath. Just allow your body to settle into that rhythm. Again, inhale. And release. And to the best of your ability now, I'm going to invite you to continue breathing just about that pace, exhaling for a little bit longer than the time that you inhale, while your focus is on your heart, breathing as if you're breathing from your heart. And the third step, so I'm going to invite you to have a feeling because you choose to have the feeling, regardless of what the world is showing you. You're the only form of life that can feel on demand because you choose to feel. And in this instance, I'm going to invite you to feel a positive feeling of gratitude for anything or anyone. Gratitude. This is easy for me right now because I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to be with you, Leah and Kyle, and our community, our global family. I'm grateful for the opportunity to come together in this way, to honor the gift of our humanness, the extraordinary potentials within us. Some members of our global family don't have this opportunity today, and they're just trying to make it through the end of the day. And on their behalf, we celebrate all of our humanness and we uplift them as we uplift ourselves. Harmonizing our heart and our brain, just feel that feeling as we breathe from our heart, holding the focus in our heart. Let's just take a moment in silence and do this for a few breaths. Okay, and with one more inhale, a deep breath. And as you begin to release that breath, become present in the space that we find ourselves in. Gently begin to open our eyes. Allow that breath to release.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. And, you know, I've had people say to me, it's interesting. I've had people say it's too easy. This is too simple because we're conditioned to think in terms of complexity. But I want our community to know that nature is simple until we make it complex through words, numbers, equations. Nature is very, very simple. And it makes perfect sense to me that we would already have the tools that trigger a cascade of healing in our bodies and that feed the field what it is that we want to experience. It makes perfect sense that we would have these today and that we've always had them from the time the first human appeared on the face of the earth. We can compare our genome today to the genome of our ancestors, and the DNA hasn't changed. They had the extended neural networks. They had everything that we have right now. So we are wired. We are wired for healing. We're wired for peace. We're wired for coherence. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and to share this. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in May at the Heart Math event. And we will do this with a whole lot of people all over the world.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Greg. And if you want tickets to that event, you can find them below. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Sending love to everybody.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. That was great.
Are you okay with where we went with the content?
Perfect.
It was
That
a
was great.
perfect, like a little bit of science, but also.
Oh, it couldn't have been better.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Sweet. Sweet.
Yeah.
I'm very relaxed now, so I don't have a
Yeah.
lot to say. That was good at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was a good time to do it. Well, you now have given me everything I need to go into my next being at my best, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So
We'll send you, it would be great. We know that you have to work with your team, but we'll send information about that group meditation, and we hope that you could share that so that the most amount of people can come.
if you please send it directly to Lori and let her know the optimum times when it would help. If you do it too far in advance, people forget. If you do it too close, they say, We don't have time to plan.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
usually I'm thinking maybe 60 to 90 days, something like that. People can put on there. That's what we usually do for an event. So, but you're the experts, you're the pros. So whatever you think is going to serve you best, I appreciate it.
That sounds good. We hope you come on with us again.
Thank you, Greg.
I will. I look forward to our next. Take good care.
Good night.
See you in May.
Thanks. See you in May.